sweet, she's a-coming down the street. Oh, I ask you confidentially, ain't she sweet? The rest is... Oh, we're on the air. Oh, good evening, friends. How are you? Poor fools. Good evening. And a tiny figure, tattered and torn, mounts the dusty podium. A light purple glow spot plays upon his hallowed head. He raises his hand. You'll notice that he is carrying a worn fielder's mitt, tattered and torn. He mounts the podium and is about to commence another long tiration, another baying at the fast receding moon. That's poetic, isn't it? Oh, you ain't heard nothing yet. Nothing. I'll award the brass piggy, boss. Hey, Walter, you ain't heard nothing yet. Who said that all the time? Who used to always say, you ain't heard nothing yet? You ain't heard a thing yet. No, it was not Franklin Delano Roosevelt. No. Who was it? It was another comic. Now, come on. Who was it who said that? Which reminds me, speaking of comedy, would you please bring some of that, the ripe, hairy stuff, sneak it in behind me. All set? Just sneak it in there. That's the kind of stuff we want. It's growing a little mold around the edges, see? And I want you to listen. I want you to listen careful. Up from the meadows, rich with corn, clear in the cool September morn, the clustered spires of Frederick stand, green-walled by the hills of Maryland. Round about them, orchards sweep, apple and peach tree fruited deep, fair as the garden of the Lord to the eyes of the famished rebel horde. On that pleasant morn of the early fall, when Lee marched over the mountain wall, over the mountains winding down, horse and foot, into Fredericktown, 40 flags with their silver stars, 40 flags with their crimson bars flapped in the morning wind. The son of noon looked down and saw not one. Up rose old Barbara Fritchie then, bowed with her 80 years and 10. Bravest of all in Fredericktown, she took up the flag the men hauled down. In her attic window the staff she set to show that one heart was loyal yet. Up the street came the rebel tread, Stonewall Jackson riding ahead. Under his slouched hat, left and right, he glanced. The old flag met his sight. Halt! The dust-brown rank stood fast. Fire! Out blazed the rifle blast. It shivered the window, pane and sash. It rent the banner with seam and gash. Quick as it fell from the broken staff, Dame Barbara snatched the silken scarf. She leaned far out on the windowsill and shook it forth with a royal will. Shoot if you must, this old gray head, but spare your country's flag, she said. Oh, a shade of sadness, a blush of shame over the face of the leader came. The nobler nature within him stirred to life at that woman's deed and word. Who touches a hair of yon gray head dies like a dog. March on, he said. All day through Frederick Street sounded the tread of marching feet. All day long, that free flag tossed over the heads of the rebel host. Ever its torn folds rose and fell on the loyal winds that loved it well. And through the hill gap's sunset light shone over it with a warm good night. Barbara Fritchie's work is o'er, and the rebel rides on his raids no more. Honor to her, and let a tear fall for her sake on Stonewall's bier. Over Barbara Fritchie's grave, flag of freedom and union wave, peace and order and beauty, draw round thy symbol of light and law, and ever the stars above look down on thy stars below in Fredericktown. Bring it up big, Will. Oh, that old babe, she laid it out. Oh, Barbara Fritchie. Oh, who touches the hair of yon gray-head dies like a dog. A rotten old yellow dog, said Stonewall Jackson. Oh, spare if you must this old gray head. But spare your country's flag, she said, and I hear you talk. walking Barbara. Oh, Barbie, you are swinging from that old windowsill like a clapper bell of hell. Spare your country's flag, she said, but shoot if you must this old gray head. Oh, let's hear that. Blow that horn, man. How'd you like that? You never heard Barbara Fritchie done as a raunchy backyard blues, did you? Well, let me tell you. That reminds me, if you think you heard rotten poetry, now you just hang in there for a minute. I'm going to read one that played a very strong part in one embarrassing moment that I once had. Let's see, I was in 8th grade. Boy, this is the time for embarrassing moments when you're in 8th grade. Would you sneak in a little more of that Harry music again? Just sneak it in there, Walter. Easy and soft. That's it. No, Walt. No, is that the one you played again? All right, bring it in there. That's it. No, that's not it. You got the next cut. You just sneak in that other one there. It's got to be Blues for Yaller Dog. You like Barbara Fritchie there? Terrible stuff. All right, sneak it in. Oh, yes. You think you heard something, friends? Listen to this one. All ready? Maud Muller, on a summer's day, raked the meadow sweet with hay. Beneath her torn hat glowed the wealth of simple beauty and rustic health. Singing she wrought, and her merry glee the mockingbird echoed from his tree. But when she glanced to the far-off town, white from its hill slope, looking down, the sweet song died, and a vague unrest and a nameless longing filled her breast, a wish that she hardly dared to own for something better than she had known. And the judge rode slowly down the lane, smoothing his horse's chestnut mane. He drew his bridle in the shade of the apple trees to greet the maid, and ask a draught from the spring that flowed through the meadow across the road. She stooped where the cool spring bubbled up, and filled for him her small tin cup, and blushed as she gave it, looking down on her feet so bare in her tattered gown. "Thanks," said the judge. "A sweeter draught from a fairer hand was never quaffed." Oh. And then he spoke of the grass and the flowers and the trees, of the singing birds and the humming bees, then talked of the haying and wondered whether the cloud in the west would bring foul weather. And Maud forgot her briar-torn gown and her graceful ankles, bare and brown, and listened, while a pleased surprise looked from her long-lashed hazel eyes. At last, like one who for delay seeks a vain excuse, he rode away. Maud Muller looked and sighed. Ah me, that I, the judge's bride, might be. He would dress me up in silks so fine, and praise and toast me at his wine. My father would wear a broadcloth coat. My brother, he could sail a painted boat. I'd dress my mother so grand and gay, and the baby would have a new toy each day. And I'd feed the hungry and clothe the poor, and all should bless me who left our door. Well, the judge looked back as he climbed the hill, and saw Maud Muller standing still. A form more fair, a face more sweet, ne'er hath it been my lot to meet, and her modest answer and graceful air show her wise and good, as she is fair. Would she were mine, and I today, like her, a harvester of hay. No doubt the balance of rights and wrongs, nor weary lawyers with endless tongues, but the low of cattle, and the song of birds, and health and quiet, and loving words. But he thought of his sisters proud and cold, and his mother vain of her rank and gold. And so, closing his heart, the judge rode on, and Maud was left in the field alone. But the lawyers smiled that afternoon, when he hummed in court an old love tune, and the young girl mused beside the well till the rain on the unraked clover fell. He wedded a wife of richest dower, who lived for fashion, as he for power. Yet, oft in his marble hearth's bright glow, he watched a picture come and go, and sweet Maud Muller's hazel eyes looked out in their innocent surprise. Oft When the wine in his glass was red, he longed for the wayside well instead, and closed his eyes on his garnished rooms to dream of meadows and clover blooms. And the proud man sighed with a secret pain. Ah, that I were free again, free as when I rode that day, where the barefoot maiden raked her hay. And she wedded a man unlearned and poor, and many children played round her door. But care and sorrow and childbirth pain left their traces on heart and brain. And oft when the summer sun shone hot on the new-mown hay in the meadow lot, and she heard the little spring brook fall over the roadside through the wall in the shade of the apple tree, again she saw a rider draw his vein, and gazing down with timid grace, she felt his pleased eyes read her face. Stop, hold it. Enough, 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 I say. Holy smokes. You know, I'm going to tell you something I don't think I've ever mentioned to anybody before. Can you ever imagine anybody taking that seriously? And I mean, really taking that seriously? Maud Muller on a summer's day, and the judge riding away to live in his garnished rooms, and Maud marries this guy who was unlearned and poor, and they had 48 kids running around the door, and she would dream, and he would dream. Well, let me tell you what happened to me. Oh, I'm so embarrassed. I'm really, you know, I always feel very envious of guys who, when they're interviewed or when they're talking about the great literary antecedents, the influences on their past, they say, oh, well, yes, I was first influenced by Thomas Wolfe. And then after that, Melville. I say that Melville probably more than but possibly with the possible exception of Conrad and maybe some of the lesser-known romantic German poets influenced my life. No. I was influenced by the books that my old man had in his bookcase. And the chief among them, was a turkey named the Canary Murder Case. I'm serious. I can remember. Yeah, he had the complete works. Was there ever a writer? Now I'm going to ask this is a literary question, and this is by way of a kind of a confession, I suppose. Did anyone ever hear of a writer who, what was his name now? My dad had his complete works. He was a fantastic fan of his. And he wrote a thing called the Canary Murder Case. I remember that vividly. I had a picture of this yellow canary on the dust jacket. I will award the brass figligee with bronze oak leaf palm. If you mean you've heard of the Canary Murder Case? You read it? You mean I'm not alone in this? Well, I'm a little kid, see, and this is the first real book I read. Up to this point, you know, I've been reading the Bobbsey twins at the farm, things like Raggedy Ann and Raggedy Ann. And one day I'm walking around the house, and it's raining out, and my mother, she's like, "Oh, will you please get out of the kitchen? Will you stay out? I'm trying to get some work done." Yeah, there's nothing to do. There's nothing to do. And she said, well, why don't you read? Why don't you go and read? I mean, so it's raining. Why don't you go and read? I got nothing to read. She says, look, we've got a whole bookcase full of books. Now, why don't you go and read something? Well, up to that point, this bookcase full of books had nothing to do with my life and reading. It was, you know, books. It was my father and my mother's books. I had all these books, see? So she says, go in the dining room and get one of the books out. And why don't you read it? We got a whole bookcase full of books. Don't tell me we don't have anything to read. So I go into the next room, and I'm looking through these books, and here is this one with this big yellow bird on it that had been there for ever since I was a little kid. I can remember this book, The Canary Murder Case. And so, gee, you know, I've got the permission to read the book out of the bookcase, so I take this book. And I go into my bedroom, and the kid reads in the bedroom, and I turn on the light. I'm sitting there, and I remember the opening paragraphs. It hit me so much. This detective lived on Riverside Drive, fashionable Riverside Drive, it was described as, if I remember, fashionable Riverside Drive, high among Manhattan's sparkling, scintillating, mysterious canyons. And he is sitting in his study, and he is smoking imported Egyptian Régie cigarettes. And he has a manservant who keeps coming around and telling him that the news is coming on in just a few moments, and that they have received a mysterious phone call, that something was going to be on the news tonight that would contain a message that would be highly important to this detective. I will award you the brass figurine if you can tell me the name of the detective. Now, who was it? It was not, and I'll give you a clue, it was not Sam Spade. I'll also give you a clue, it was not Humphrey Bogart. And and from that minute on, was I hung on this guy. I mean, he had this, his powerful motor car, his powerful imported motor car purred ominously outside of his fashionable Upper Riverside Drive apartment. And his manservant. What was the name of his manservant? All right, what do you mean? Come on, everybody talking about. Well, these are the things that are my. If people keep writing me and say, well, what influenced you in your early days? Well, I'm telling you, for at least, I would say, for at least 6 months as a kid. Now get this, as a kid, for at least 6 months, I patterned my way of being on this detective. Just like, a lot of kids holler Shazam and try to pretend like they're Superman. I played like this detective, and I would say things like, such things like, well, of course, you realize that the wine from Alsatia is always a little impudent. I'd say that. I remember flicking through and I was like, oh, what are you talking about? I said, well, another thing, all the kids at that time, guys were experimenting with smoking, see? And everybody was sneaking out and stealing a package of Lucky Strikes, so they were going out and they'd save their nickels and they would sneak into Oschenschlager's grocery store and they would buy a package of Camels and tell them it's for their old man. I'm probably the only guy you ever knew who saved up nickels for about 4 weeks to buy a package of Fatimas. Because they had this picture of this dancing girl. Yeah. All right, what was the name of that detective? Meccas. Never heard of them. Meccas are those little flat candies. Speaking of Mecca, friends, this is WOR, your friendly, reliable fighting station. Your embattled station on this spot of the time. This is the John Gambling station, and we'll be here for a while. And that reminds me, we have a big note here, very official. This Thursday night. Now, look, I must have received about 50 letters in the past 2 or 3 days from people who say, how come I missed the show at the Middlesex High Auditorium for Raritan Valley Hospital and so on, and that we're going to have a big, wild, fantastic, just contagious, it's just going to be so exciting, so scintillating. I'm going to do my famous vest pocket version of Electra at Seton Hall, and it's played in armor. Well, it's very good. I come on, I play Orestes, and then I play the King and the whole bit. And it's going to be Seton Hall University Student Union Building, and we're being brought over there by the radio station WSOU, which is their big radio station. And it's going to be Thursday, February 1st. That's this Thursday at 8:30. Tickets are at the door, so do not try to write or call. Tickets are on sale, first come, first serve, and again repeat, the Student Union Building, Seton Hall. That's Thursday, February 1st, 8:30, WSOU. Well, have you noticed that not one guy got the name of that detective? It is not Sherlock Holmes, you klutz. Sherlock Holmes he never had the savoir-faire that this guy had. And he lived, if I'm not mistaken, I think it was in an apartment on Riverside Drive. Now, when you live in a place like Hessville, Indiana, and you're a kid, and you read about fashionable, sparkling Manhattan, I just can't, I'm serious, Walt, I just can't tell you what the word Manhattan does to somebody living in, say, Goshen, Indiana. It's like some kind of a rare herb. I'll tell you what it's like. There are certain words by their very nature are exciting. I'll give you some of those. Here's an example. Arabia. Isn't that an exciting word? How about this one? Trinidad. That's an exciting... How about this one? Zanzibar. Holy smokes, Zanzibar. Would you like to be a member of the Zanzibar American Legion Post? Zanzibar. How about this one? Try this one on for size. How about Port of Spain? Port of Spain. And there are several others, like Oahu, the island of Oahu. Those, one of the greatest of all words is, Dar es Salaam. I repeat. Can you give me a little echo chamber on that wall? Think of some of these great words. You could write a poem of nothing but great words. Listen. Khartoum. Kilimanjaro. Mediterranean. Aegean Sea. Crete. Dar es Salaam. Timbuktu. Boy. I mean, think of those names. Well, now you get the feeling, see? Well, when the word Manhattan, and it, even to this day, it has that same peculiar, erotic, subtle, glamorous, mysterious impact on a guy living in Moose Cavity Tooth, Minnesota. I mean, seriously, Manhattan. If you say I come from Flushing, come on, Flushing. Sounds like an ad for Babbo, Or if you say I come from Queens, he said, Queens, where's that? Queens. And you say, well, Queens, New York. He says, is that near New York City? So Manhattan is a special thing. They even had songs that were always singing, oh, I love Manhattan, la ta da ti ti ta 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 ti. People go ape in Chicago when people sing those songs. You don't ever hear anybody say, I love the Bronx, la ta da ti ti, Fordham Road, or the Grand Concourse in spring. La ta. No, there's the picture of Manhattan. Always to me, when I was a little kid, was some kind of it was always night. I always saw Manhattan as night, with all the buildings standing up and nothing but these magnificent lights everywhere, and guys wearing evening suits, and getting into long black limousines with Carole Lombard. And they're about to go to this fashionable place. It was like the First Nighter. And the little theater off Times Square, the First Nighter, once again arrives for another exciting first night in the theater. And you hear, boop, 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 smoking in the outer lobby only, please, smoking in the... And you say, good night, James, and he slams the door. Oh, wow, yeah. Holy smokes. Then there was this other one called Grand Central. There was another show on radio called Grand Central Station. Do you remember that one? The opening would come out. Well, you were the engineer on it, Walt? Holy smokes, I'm with a historical entity. What was it called? Yeah, you were the sound effects? You mean you made the sound of those rails? Walt, why didn't you tell me? That's like sitting here with the guys who says, well, what do you mean, the Magna Carta? Who do you think gave the king the pen? I supplied the parchment. Well, I remember as a kid, my mother, all of her life, she had this thing, and still does. New York. She used to hang over the sink. And the sink would be coughing up coffee grounds and apple cores at her. And my mother would always say, and the old man, he's sitting at the kitchen table and he's sitting there in his long johns, with half the buttons off, and he's got a can of beer. And my mother is saying, the radio was playing with somebody like Lee Wiley singing on the air. She always has this cracked, decadent voice. There was something about New York and singers who sang about New York. That certain kind of a distingué sound. It's the sound that Cole Porter caught in his lyrics. And the radio, this little cracked night Allied radio that we had that had the tape all over it and the dial hanging out. and you'd hear Lee Wiley with Jess Stacy or somebody, and she'd say, I love Manhattan. La-da-da-dee-da-da-da. And the singers all sounded like they had just been drinking champagne cocktails out of somebody's slippers. My mother's hanging over the sink. I love Manhattan. La-da-da-dee-dee-da-da-da-da-dee. And my mother would say, one day I'm going to New York. But the old man would snort. You'd hear, black. Yeah, New York. And she'd hang over the sink, and you'd hear her curlers rattling. I love Manhattan. La-da-da-dee-da-da-da-dee-dee-dee-dee. And then the announcer would make the station break, and on would come the show. You'd hear this thunder of rails out of the west and through 125th Street, past teeming tenants, past raging. The great 20th Century Limited speeds towards Grand Central Station. Grand Central Station. Yes, Grand Central Station, where 1,000 mysterious lies crisscross and cross, where millions of people every day walk quietly and soundlessly, and millions of lives are spent in... Oh, wow. My mother'd stand there with her Brillo pan in her hand. Grand Central Station. Was there ever such a show, Walt? You know there was. It was about Tales, and then there was another show called Tales of Manhattan. Did you ever hear that one? And they'd come out with this. No, that wasn't Tales of Manhattan. Yeah, Manhattan Merry-Go-Round. Yeah, and my mother would say, oh, her mouth is hanging open. Oh, wow, they played their music so fast. And this announcer would say, Manhattan Merry-Go-Round. Every song sung so clearly that you can understand every word. Manhattan Merry-Go-Round. Didn't he say that? Manhattan Merry-Go-Round. Oh, Manhattan. You never once, friend, heard the East Chicago merry-go-round. Ever. On nationwide radio, television, anything. Oh, New York. One day I'm going to New York, she would say. New York. And the old man would say, what's the matter with Chicago? She'd say, nothing. But one day I'm going to New York. And, of course, I'm a kid, and I have read the Canary murder case. And now... And the old man had every last volume of the work of this fantastic writer who created this detective. I will award the brass figurine. Come on now, anybody out there can give me the name of his manservant. I'll tell you what he was. Seriously, this detective, he was the character upon which Rip Kirby is based. You know Rip Kirby, the comic strip detective? You ever seen him with the glasses? He's always driving the Jaguars around. He has his manservant. Well, I'm a kid seeing. I'm reading the story of this Manhattan paragon, a fantastic detective, and he lives high up above Riverside Drive. And I always thought Riverside Drive, somehow it sounded so exciting. It sounded like... it's hard to describe it now because I know Riverside Drive now, you know. But I just remember Riverside Drive. And he had this fashionable bachelor's apartment, bachelor's quarters, they referred to it. And he always had a study. Now, I'll tell you what we had in our house. We had a dining room. we had a bathroom. There was my kid brother's and my bedroom. There was my mother's bedroom. And we had a kitchen. And we had what my mother called the living room. And in the living room, we had a living room suite. No, actually, what we had was a living room suite. No, she didn't call it parlor. We always called it the living room suite. Now, the living room suite meant that we got the matched furniture, the matched cherrywood furniture that came from Friday's Furniture. And we had a living room suite. We had a dining room suite, but not this detective. He didn't live like that. He had rare imported Spanish furniture of the 15th century. And he would sit rocking back and forth, looking contemplatively up at the ceiling, with the volume of Aeschylus that he had been reading, kind of tossed casually to one side. And he is sipping rare McDarrah sherry, 47 years old, bonded in bond. And he's sitting there and smoking his imported Egyptian Régie cigarettes. I thought, holy smokes. And I read this, and I look out at the old man, and what's the old man doing there? Well, he's sitting there, and he's running around. I always remember this picture after reading this. What is my old man doing? He was such a fanatic smoker that he is running around all over the house looking in the ashtrays for a cigarette butt that's longer than a quarter of an inch. And this detective, he is smoking imported Régie cigarettes. I always remember that word, Régie. R-E-G-I-E. Was there such a cigarette? And they were gold-tipped. That's right, gold-tipped Régie cigarettes. And they were perfumed. They had a rare perfume. And the implication was that they contained more than plain tobacco. Always. He's sitting there, and the smoke is drifting up near the ceiling of his dimly lighted, lush, luxurious bachelor quarters, and he is seeing the face of this lovely girl, Minerva, who he had left on the island of Madagascar in the hands of the evil dacoits. What a life! Well, this is what I always thought Manhattan was very much like this. And literature began to get me. See, I'm a real ape on literature now. I'm reading the Canary Murder Case. I'm reading stuff like what was that other one? That was he wrote another one. This guy, the Sparrow Murder Case. The Scarab. That's it. Oh, you got it. Yeah, the Scarab, and it was a golden Egyptian scarab that this detective was after, and the killer. I remember I remember the Scarab Murder Case. The killer, the evil killer, or the mysterious gang of killers, or jewel thieves. That's what it is. Jewel thieves. Wherever they would go, they would leave a scarab to show that the scarab has struck again. And it was an Egyptian golden scarab. Now, there was another guy, so I began to get really involved in this stuff. See, I'm reading this detective and going ape. Boy, I'll have to get some of this stuff and read it on the air. It would make great reading with music accompaniment. And so, one day, I'm down at the library, and I have read everything this guy ever wrote, this great writer. And I have read the Scarab Murder Case, and I have read the Canary Murder Case 7 times. I read it sideways. I read it from the back to the front, and I can quote you chapters. Oh, I could give long quotations. I've always admired guys who could give long quotations of Wordsworth. I could give quotations from the Canary Murder Case. Oh, yes. Oh, yes, I'll never forget. And I would give a long quotation. Of course, this went over like a lead balloon with Schwartz and Frank in that crowd. And so one day I'm down at the library. And you get to meet in the library, if you're a real library nut, you get to meet other guys and other people who are also nuts on the same kind of thing that you dig in the library. They're always there, you see. It's like if you're a stamp collector and you keep going and asking for stamp collector books, eventually you'll see a little gnarled man say, "Hey, do you like stamps?" And the next thing you know, you're talking. So one day I am returning about 8 SS Van Dyne, that was his name, about 8 big fat SS Van Dyne mysteries. And this guy at the counter says to me, he says, "Oh, you like SS Van Dyne?" And I says, oh, fantastic. In fact, I'm thinking of getting the title page of the Scarab tattooed on my thorax. It's just the greatest stuff. This is real literature. And he says to me, well, he said, you would like this then. And he hands me a worn library book that had been taken out by about 48 million people. It was so worn, the dog ears went all the way to the middle of the book. They were so dogged. The book was round like a softball. It was so dog-eared. See? Yeah, I mean, real. This is a working book. And you could see inside, where it had been stamped 5,020 times, and the red and green stamps. And he says, and this is the guy working in the library, and he says, "I think you'd enjoy this." He said, "This is my favorite. I really love this work." And little did I realize, I am about to meet a hero who even to this day affects my every move. Oh, yeah. I don't like trench coats. Well, I'll tell you, I bought a trench coat here the other day, and every time I walk down 46th Street and the rain is slanting, I pull it up. I pull it up around my, pull it up around my neck, and I put that cap down. And my eyes narrow to mere slits, and I start walking with a very exaggerated limp. I'm assuming the character. Well, I picked this guy's book. It was a great book. Say, I started to read it, and I'll tell you, it made S.S. Van Dyne look like greasy kid stuff. That hero, I'll tell you what a magnificent hero he was. Do you know that this hero lived so high off the hog that this guy, he was a highly respected young man about town, and some thought he was a playboy, but secretly, in the quiet of his study, he plotted to deal with the evil minions of crime. Now, who was he? Now, you know what he also did? He wore, I'll give you a clue, he always wore around him, inside, whenever he went out, in his faultless velvet evening cape, which had a blood-red silk lining, and his Malacca cane, he always wore around his chest a magnificent, beautifully made, rare Swedish steel set of burglar tools. That's right. And they were carried, it said that these burglar tools were carried in it said paper-thin, kid-skin, specially made case. That's right. He had all kinds. He had a pencil that shot gas. Yeah. A flashlight. I remember the pencil. He had this magnificent silver Tiffany pencil. It was from Tiffany's that he had at great cost had this thing made, and it was a pencil that shot a thin beam of intense light. And he was the greatest safecracker known in the history of the world. He had these sensitive fingertips. And they were so sensitive that when he was not working at his trade, he had to wear gloves because his nerves were so sensitive that he would sit there and he would feel the tabletop and he could feel the grain of the wood. And there was one incident where he was blindfolded by these evil guys that caught him. And completely blindfolded. He did not know where he was. But one thing they did not do, they did not deal with his hands, because his hands were even more sensitive than his eyes. And he is lying there, see, and he's tied, and he feels around him, see, and he can feel the wood of the wall, and he says to himself, I see. This is unpainted green American oak. How's that for he could tell what kind of wood it was by feeling it. That's, holy smokes, what a Boy Scout this guy would make. And he went all the way. And he had this girlfriend. And she was like all the girlfriends of all those guys. She was so beautiful and so stunning. And she had no idea of what he was doing. He was always this gay man about town, and he would meet her, and then he would slip away. He would have her at the Silver Slipper or someplace where they're having an evening dinner after. They always did these things like have a supper after the show. You know, at home, supper to us was at 6 o'clock. My mother would put out the spaghetti and the meatloaf, and that was supper. They had what they called a late supper. Well, I never could figure out what they meant after the show, you know, having supper at 11, 12 o'clock. And he would always order a cold bird. He says a cold bird, and a cold bottle. And how about, Saint Martin Beaujolais 03, perhaps. And the rare wine was brought to him. And the cold bird was served on the silver salver. I remember what a salver was. He'd sit there at his evening dress, and little did his beautiful girlfriend, Ardella, or whatever her name was, little did she realize that neath that magnificently tailored, that beautifully cut tuxedo, there was a set of deadly blue steel burglar tools. And he was waiting for the message. And they're sitting there carving the bird, when suddenly the French waiter comes up and says, for you, monsieur. And he hands him a card. And on the card is a simple, pen-drawn cat's paw. And he whitens slightly. He says, thank you. And he hands him a note, a 5-pound note, as a tip, see? A note. And the waiter says, merci, monsieur. And off he goes. And then he looks across at his fair companion. And he says, you will excuse me for just a few minutes. I will return there is a task I must take care of. Just a small thing. And you will stay here, and Louis will see to it that the wine will continue to come. I will join you. And that's the way the first chapter would start. And 8 chapters later, after he's been up and down the waterfront, and he's been fighting this fantastic bunch of hashish, drunk, evil people, he returns to the Silver Slipper. And he says, I see. Well, we shall have another bottle now. And she had no idea that in the ensuing time, he had been through veritable hell. Now, what was the character? He had an alter ego. Now, I'll give you this clue. He had an alter ego, Walt, this guy. And the alter ego was the guy that he would slip into when he decided to become a member of the underworld. He had a dual life. On the one hand, he was who? All right, is there any listener out there can tell me the name of this fantastic character that I'm talking about? Oh, and I will give you one other important clue. As a kid, you know, this really got a hold of me. One clue. Every time he would open a safe. Now, the only time he ever opened a safe was to catch the bad guys and so on. But every time he would open a safe, he had this trademark. Hey, do you have any commercials in there? No, okay. He would have this trademark, and he would leave this trademark beside the knob on the safe. And the trademark was what? It was not a scarab. A gray seal. The gray seal. Yes, a diamond-shaped gray seal. And I remember the inspector and the sergeant of police would say, the gray seal. We don't have a chance. He struck again. And what was the name? His name, I'll tell you in case you're interested, his name was Jimmy Dale. But what was the name of the character? He had a character he played when he was down on the waterfront. What was the name of the character? Come on. And by the way, the character that he played was a completely depraved, totally drug-crazed dope fiend. Those days they call them dope fiends. He was a dope fiend. What was his name? And he would assume this character. He would go into the dressing room at the club, and all of a sudden this awful person would come out, and they would throw him out. They didn't know it was him. And he would go down the street with his cap and his shifty eyes, and he was known to everybody in the underworld as this dope fiend. What was his name? That's the guy that I always play. Now, I'll give you this. I never play Jimmy Dale when I'm out. I always play this depraved, drug-crazed dope fiend who is known in every dive on the waterfront. What was the guy's name? Anybody know? All right. Well, those are the antecedents. Those are the things that make you what you are. and one more thing. He, too, had a manservant. They always had manservants. I'll never forget the time I said to Schwartz, I said, hey, Schwartz, how would you like to be my manservant? And you be my manservant, and I'll be the gay man about town. So I am manservant. What's a manservant? I said, well, you hold my coat, and you put it on. You bring me the wine. You can open my knee-high orange. Don't tell me somebody's calling in and knows it. Well, hang loose, friends. These are the things of which Maud Muller's life is made. And don't forget Barbara Fritchie, friends. Oh, yes. Hail not. Yes, harm this old gray head, but leave the flag unfurled. Hang loose. Think good thoughts. It'll work out.